Gautama Buddha said, after years and years of meditation and self-denial, he discovered the first noble truth of human existence, which is that life is dukkha. Many of you may have heard this before. It's often translated as life is suffering, but that's a little bit of a mistranslation. It's actually more complicated than that. Dukkha means a bone that slipped out of its socket. It sounds kind of painful, doesn't it? It also can be translated as a wheel with the hub that's just a little bit out of center. And I think that at a very core way, the Buddha is describing what it means to be human. That's kind of a depressing way to start a TED Talk, but it also, when we start there, it lays the foundation for what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is how we bounce back, how we cultivate what is called in psychological literature resilience. And to begin this conversation, I want to start with some kind of artistic ways of thinking about the concept of resilience. This first quote, "If your heart is broken, make art with the pieces." I like to think it's actually when your heart is broken. It's probably more accurate because all of us will face times when our heart is broken. And resilience is about what we do with that. Can we make art with those pieces? I also like this other quote describing a character in The Thrill of Grass. She had fouled off the curves that life had thrown at her. And I think this one's a great way to think about resilience. And in my work with Cornell students, I think it's really helpful because I see a lot of students that want to be perfect. They want to hit a home run every time they're up at the plate. Anyone who's played softball or baseball knows there are a lot of good pitchers out there. That's not possible. There's even a quote at Cornell that kind of summarizes that perfectionism. It's on a T-shirt. It says, Cornell University, where your best hasn't been good enough since 1865. It's kind of funny. Probably just some of you are Cornell alum out there. Describes the culture a little bit. And I think resilience is about shifting that mind frame to move away from that perfectionism. So that's a little bit of the artistic way I think about resilience. But there's also a definition within psychology. And some of the ways in which psychologists define resilience are looking at, one, positive outcomes despite a high-risk status, competence in the face of stress, adapting well to trauma, and using challenges for growth to make future hardships more manageable. So those are some of the ways researchers look at resilience. And one of the great things about resilience, it's something that can be taught. It's something that we all have some skill at, we all have some ability at it, and we can all do it better. It also is made up of multiple components. And an acronym I came up with to kind of remember some of those key components is that resilience saves. And the first S is social connection. As human beings, it's often easy to forget how important our social connections are to us. But biologically, isolation is toxic to the human nervous system. We need each other. We are a part of a superorganism of humanity, and those connections are essential. And when we lose sight of that, we're at risk for things like depression and suicide. There are types of therapies that intentionally focus on helping people get connected. So how do we get connected? One of the ways we get connected is by doing something for somebody else. We did a nice exercise here already where we hugged each other. Great example, my little stick figure drawing. What can I do? You're already doing it. When we connect in these ways, there's a lot of biological things that are going on that are really positive. One is the release of oxytocin, which you see in sexuality, you see in a lot of things that are very, very positive. Just having basic human connection and basic hug can do that. Also, doing things for another person has a release of dopamine in the brain, can lead to a lot of positive outcomes, which you're seeing illustrated in this little stick figure. Another way in which social connection is important is to think about surrounding ourselves with resilient role models. And my resilient role model is my 11-year-old son. This is Cade. When Cade was born, he was born without his right arm, his right hand. And my wife and I at first, when we heard about this at a routine visit, there was a lot of fear, a lot of concern. But I guess the amazing thing that I didn't even think about at the time, which has really unfolded for me in his 11 years, is he's my resilient role model. I watch him every day overcome something. Daily, normal challenges, most of the rest of us just take for granted. We just do it without a second thought. And I watch him be very, very creative and be very, very diligent in how he can solve problems. And it's something that I don't have to do in a lot of ways. He's just really amazing. And you see him here. They actually didn't let him fly the plane, but there's a picture of him in the cockpit of a plane. And he really is able to do pretty much whatever he wants to do. He just has to work a little harder at it. Here he is paddleboarding, playing football. He really is my resilient role model. And one of the ways that I think about the importance of social connection is illustrated to me in this comic. You see this guy in a boat. The boat's kind of rickety. The waves are crashing over. There's sharks out there. and he's holding a swan, and he's got a big, satisfied smile on his face. And this is a great illustration for all of us about how we need in our lives to find our swan. We need to find someone who can help us and connect us in ways that we can deal with all these challenges that will come around us. The A is attitude. The greatest discovery of any generation is that a human being can alter his or her life by altering his or her attitude. William James, the founder of American psychology, said that. I break attitude down into three things. This kind of comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. The three Ps. The first is permanence. When we are more resilient and something challenging happens to us, a resilient way of thinking is saying, this is not going to be permanent. This will change. Maybe good, maybe bad, I don't know. It's taking that step back. A great story to illustrate this comes from Taoist thought about a Chinese farmer. Lives in a small village, he's very poor. His one resource is this beautiful horse. One day the horse runs away. His neighbors come to him and say, oh, this is terrible, this is awful, what are you going to do? He says, well, we'll see. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Next day, horse comes back with a whole herd of stallions. Now he's like the wealthiest guy in the village. Like neighbors come, oh, this is wonderful, this is amazing. He said, we'll see. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Next day, his oldest son, who helps him with everything, is out there trying to train one of the horses. The horse throws him off. He breaks his leg badly. Can't help the farmer planning all these things. Neighbors come, same thing. This is terrible. This is awful. We'll see. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? The next day, the Chinese army comes. They take the oldest son from every family to go fight in a war. They leave his son because his leg's broken. Neighbors, same thing. Oh, you're so lucky you're the only one in the village whose son is still here. We'll see. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? That kind of idea that no matter what the circumstance, things will change. Tomorrow might bring something different. Something that feels awful today may be something very rewarding tomorrow, and vice versa. The second P, pervasiveness. When we are resilient, we're able to kind of contain negative events or even shift our focus to things that are much more positive and let that positive thing grow. My favorite story that illustrates this comes from a therapist named Milton Erickson. And Erickson was this very creative therapist who would develop a new approach for everyone he worked with, pretty well known throughout the 60s and 70s. He was giving a talk in a city where one of his colleagues' sister had been in a terrible car accident. In this accident, her husband was killed, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. And she had been really pretty depressed for the last 6 months. And this friend says to Erickson, just please go and help her. Please just, whatever you can do. So he says, okay, I will go and I'll do what I can. So he shows up, a nice house. They were actually a fairly wealthy couple. She has people helping her. He comes in, he starts talking to her, he asks her what happened. He's kind of down, as he listens to the story. It's a very sad story. He's like, she kind of gives him a tour of the house. He sees a greenhouse out back that has a ramp and is wheelchair accessible. And he asks her about that. She said, well, one of the things I'm able to do still is I garden and I raise African violets, and that's really important to me. And Erickson's like, wow, I can't even keep my houseplants alive. That really takes a lot of work. So he talks some more about, what are other things you still do after the accident? She says, well, I still go to church. He's like, oh, well, tell me about that. She said, well, I still go, but I go late and I leave early because I feel like I'm in people's way. But it's still important to me. So he's kind of listened to her some more, and he's kind of thinking about what else he can do. And he's getting ready to leave, and he says, you know what? I know what your problem is. You're just not a good enough Christian. This woman's like kind of offended. What? How can you say that? I've been in this accident. And she's like, no, wait. You tell me you have this gift, and you go to church, and you're not sharing it with anybody. That doesn't seem like a very Christian thing to do. She's like, well, I guess that makes sense. So Erickson says, I just want you to do one thing. In the church bulletin, anytime you see a funeral, a death, or a birth, take that African violet to somebody. Just give it to them. That's it. So when he tells this story, he kind of tells it to 10 years later, he pulls out a headline from this city. And it says, African violet queen mourned by thousands. And he says, when I was working with her, there was a lot of negative stuff, a lot of pain. And I couldn't do anything, I shouldn't do anything to try to take that away. But if I could just grow that one piece, that's what's most important. And then the third P is personalization. When we get in a place where something negative happens and we think it's about us, we did something wrong, we're far less likely to be resilient. Being resilient is about opening up to the broader context. And one of my experiences with this was early on in my career as a psychologist. I was working in another counseling service, new to the staff. The director there was really well liked, but kind of avoided conflict and left our staff meeting once and said, well, Greg, why don't you finish facilitating? And silly me, I kind of opened it up with an open question. And in about 5 seconds, people were yelling at each other, screaming at each other, storming out the door. And I'm thinking, man, this whole leadership thing, this may not be for me, this administration. I started kind of taking it personally. As I thought about it, I realized there's a broader context, there's a broader history here. Maybe I could have done something better, but it wasn't just about me. And when we're able to kind of cultivate a more resilient attitude, we're able to kind of get these 3 P's straight. And this is illustrated by another Michael Leunig cartoon. Here you see the dad. He's playing his guitar. He's got his family. He says, gee, Dad, you're fantastic. It's a great illustration of all of these things. Just not letting the negative stuff, this kind of danger keep out, this dark surrounding, encroach on that. He's keeping his P's straight. The V, values. How we cultivate values. We do it a lot of ways. Spirituality, religion, finding something that we hold on to when the storms are beating against us. And I love this quote by Rabbi Simcha Bunim. It says, keep 2 truths in your pocket. Take them out according to the need of the moment. Let one be, for my sake, the world is created, and the other, I am dust and ashes. So I think spirituality and values are about balancing the sense that we are unique and special with humility. The sense that, everything we felt, everything we believe is something somebody else has also probably found important as well. And one of my favorite authors that talks about values and meaning and purpose is Viktor Frankl. Some of you probably read his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of my all-time favorite books, kind of influenced me and inspired me to become a therapist. And Frankl was a psychiatrist during World War II and was interned in a concentration camp. And what he talked about, he built a whole approach to psychotherapy and this idea of what really matters is what life expects from us. And what we have to do is bring meaning to it. And the best part of the book for me was the part of the book where Frankl had been helping people in the concentration camp for years. It's towards the end of the war. People want to kind of help him escape. And he's getting out, and he's going around to his patients on the final day. And one of them kind of notices something different about his countenance and says, Dr. Frankl, you're getting out, aren't you? And he kind of said, well, yeah, don't tell anybody. And he said, I just want to thank you. This man's dying, and he thanks Frankl. Frankl has this moment of like, do I really want to escape, or do I want to stay? And he makes this conscious choice to stay in a concentration camp. And he said, I never felt that same level of peace in my whole life, even before when he had not been in a concentration camp. This conscious decision to pursue what really mattered freed him. And that's where our values come from. The E in the SAVES model is emotions and emotional acceptance. In our culture, I think a lot of times we don't have a lot of good language to manage our emotions. If something comes up that's undesirable, we think it's wrong. We have to change it. I'm feeling anxious. I don't want to do that. Think of doing a TED Talk. Anything meaningful actually produces uncomfortable emotions, right? But what happens in therapy is people do this. They think, the anxiety is here. I want to pull it into there because I don't want it to be there. And people come to therapy and they want their therapist to get right there next to them and pull this monster into this chasm. But the monster is their own experience. What therapists try to do and what we need to do to be resilient is kind of have a creative hopelessness. That if there's something that's really valuable to us and it produces uncomfortable emotions, we stay with it. We accept what is. And what a good therapist does is this: teach somebody to drop the rope. Be curious. Stand there. What's this about? What are these feelings about? What's this emotional reaction about? It's part of my experience. The final piece is S, silliness, laughing at yourself. This quote by Auden, I think, is a nice way of thinking about it. We're all here on earth to help others. What on earth the others are here for, I don't know. I think that's a nice way to kind of think about not taking ourselves too seriously. Because most of us have felt like this at one point or another. We're the dinosaurs, the water's rising, we didn't check our Outlook calendar. Oh man, was that today? I can't believe it. And humor allows us to not take ourselves too seriously. I had a great experience with this. When I first started working at Cornell, did this kind of big spread in the alumni magazine and asked me all these questions. I was kind of nervous about it. And they did like this diagram of me, this cartoon of me for the article. And I was like, man, I look like Homer Simpson, which I kind of do. And I was telling one of my staff members about this talk and showed her the slide. And she's like, it's a really good thing they didn't do this drawing now because you look even more like Homer Simpson. So, but I think it's an important reminder. Part of humor is learning not to take ourselves too seriously, because when we do, we end up like this. We miss the big picture. We think elephants are larger than the moon. All of us have probably been there, right? Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm taking myself so seriously. I miss the obvious. And the obvious is being able to step back and laugh at ourselves sometimes. So, social connection, find your swan. Find somebody to hold on to. Attitude, get your P's straight. Values, pursue what matters to you. Emotional acceptance, accept what is. And S, silliness, laugh. So get out there, get engaged, make art with the pieces, and foul off the curveballs. Thank you.